Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
So Arianna, I guess the first thing I wanted to hit on is just, how did you get where you are? You know, we have an audience here of people who probably look at the Huffington Post and say, wow, this is one of the most successful new media properties in this, in this Web 2.0 era. You've continued to climb in the rankings. You're now #1 blog. I was looking recently. It looks like you have about half the traffic of the Washington Post, which has been around for 100 odd years. What's the secret?
Well, the secret is you have to start by being born in Greece. You have a strong accent, so you look for a place where the accent doesn't matter, and you find it in cyberspace. I think the secret is passion. The secret is that I fell in love with the web when I was writing books and having a syndicated column, and I suddenly saw how amazing it was that people without a platform could suddenly find a platform and have an impact. And the moment when I woke up to the consequences was when Josh Marshall and others picked on the fact that Trent Lott had made a racist comment at a Strom Thurmond lunch. And while the mainstream media ignored it, they stayed on it and stayed on it until Trent Lott was the former Senate Majority Leader. And so I loved that obsessive, compulsive nature of the web. The fact that by staying on your passions, on what you believe, on what you're interested in, can actually make a big difference, even if you don't own a printing press, even if you don't have the history of 100 years in business. And so we wanted to bring together three things. To be a news aggregator with an attitude. You know, we have our own attitude, we have our own point of view, but we aggregate news from everywhere in the world. To provide a platform for now over 2,000 bloggers, some well-known, who otherwise would not take the time to maintain their own blog, but wanted to be part of the conversation, some not well-known, who would then find a platform to make their ideas and themselves better known. And of course, the third and sort of magic ingredient is community. Community is central to the Huffington Post.
Yeah, I'll notice sometimes you've got a story and, really you just have a short lead, which is pointing off to a piece on the New York Times or the Washington Post or some other mainstream media, but there's 500 comments.
Yes.
And the Times doesn't get anything like that on its story. So clearly people who come to the Huffington Post are engaged and excited.
Well, and what you mentioned about comments was another big decision we made early on. From day one, we made sure that our comments on the blog were pre-moderated. As you know, one of the main problems we're having is technology has not gotten to the point where you can actually screen vile ad hominem attacks. Any guy here, any girl who is working on this, please accelerate your efforts. We are longing for those tools. In the meantime, there is no substitute for human pre-moderation. So we now have 30 moderators working 24/7 to actually pre-moderate quickly so that there is no real delay between posting a comment and seeing it appear. But otherwise, the discussion would be basically really undermined.
Do those moderators actually participate in the discussion as well, perhaps guide it or start off a particular direction?
That's a good idea. I'm going to talk to them about that. For the moment, their job is sort of simply to delete any ad hominem vile attacks. And as you know, it's normally 1% of 1% of the people who read who are participating in that, but they can destroy the rest of the conversation.
Yeah. So what's the total team look like? I mean, how much of it's how big a tech team do you have, for example?
So the team, we are now about 60 people, mostly in New York, 560 Broadway on top of Dean and DeLuca if you want to come visit us. We are on the 3rd floor. We have our advertising team and our administrative team. And on the 4th floor, we have our editorial team and our tech team. So tech is right there with editorial because we are finding that our traffic is a third, a third, a third. A third bookmarked direct traffic, a third links, and a third search. And So we're constantly...
When we were backstage, Brady Forrest was remarking during the election, he's found he's become much more of a direct consumer. And I've been finding that myself too. I'm going to HuffingtonPost.com first. Have you seen any increases in the direct traffic side?
Yes, absolutely. I think first of all, one of the things that helps a lot in terms of influencing the debate is that we are bookmarked by all the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. So if we, for example, do a big splash headline, which we did early last week, while Rome burns, meaning that we were fiddling, talking about lipstick on a pig and all that while Rome was burning, it was a little prescient given that Rome is really burning right now.
Right.
And so we saw immediately that that meme was picked up by others.
Yeah.
So that's one of the exciting things that especially if we do a splash headline, we can influence the way the news is seen.
Right. So describe your process for, is it a little bit like I remember the movie about Watergate, where they had Ben Brantley leading the discussion of what would they push the Watergate story to the front page, Do you guys have those kind of staff meetings where you decide, how does that happen in your
Well, first of all, we have a great group of news editors and a great group of blog editors who work sort of round the clock. And we have certain editorial positions. Just to give you a couple of examples that guide our coverage and guide what we decide to splash. We believe that Iraq is the greatest foreign policy disaster in American history. So while many in the mainstream media may have moved on or bought into the delusion that a victory is in sight, we stay on the news. So we may find some news in paragraph 23 of a story in the New York Times, and we'll make it a headline in order to indicate that violence is ongoing, that political reconciliation is nowhere in sight. So that's, for example, one thing that we believe in, and we find the news and the facts that back this up.
So in some ways, it sounds like you and Rupert Murdoch have a lot in common.
Really?
Yeah. Well, in the sense, if you think about the received dogma of news, for many, many years was, we must be impartial, we must be impartial. And, both you and Rupert really see it as a vehicle for helping shape what people see and think.
Oh, but there's a huge difference, and this is that we want to shape the debate based on facts. They want to...
Would you say that?
It is truly a huge difference, because we believe that there is such a thing as truth, and that it is the job of journalism, whether in print, TV, radio, or online, to ferret out the truth, and that we believe that this is our highest mission. And if you look at not just Fox, but a lot of the mainstream media, in the case of Fox, they just are fair and balanced, which means completely and utterly partisan. And in the case of many in the mainstream media, they basically often see their role as presenting all sides to the story and being quote-unquote objective. Well, I don't think it is objective, for example, to present both sides to the idea that the Earth is flat. The Earth is not flat. So if, in the same way, you present both sides to the idea of global warming, on the one hand, you have Al Gore discussing the dangers of global warming. On the other hand, you have Senator James Inhofe telling us that global warming is a fraud, or Sarah Palin telling us that global warming is not man-made. This is not giving equal value to the truth. This is really being Pontius Pilate and pretending there is no truth.
So obviously, with that focus on truth, that takes us into the realm of politics. How do you read the current political situation?
It's really interesting, but last week we had an amazing phenomenon of the American public and the American media being distracted by the selection of Sarah Palin. It was as though we were watching a soap opera.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting soap opera because it was a little bit like Frank Capra, an obscure person being plucked from obscurity and being brought into the limelight. She clearly has real talents in terms of connecting with people, speaking, and so that people started really obsessing over all the little stories, like, is she a good mom? Will Bristol be happy with her future husband? you know, did she really sell her jet on eBay, or did she merely list it on eBay? Does she have a lipstick that is a tattoo? You know, all those things, you know, these real obsessions. And then suddenly,
reality intruded.
Reality intruded. It was as though this was this new guest at a party, and we were fascinated and titillated by her stories, and then suddenly the house is on fire. And so now, you know, we're not as titillated and entertained by the stories. We kind of have woken up. And I'm really glad about that, because I felt from the beginning, and I wrote a lot about it on HuffPost, that, you know, the Trojan horse story, you know, in Greek history, mythology, whatever. Well, I thought that Sarah Palin was a Trojan moose. That she was basically going to sort of conceal and hide, you know, the truth about the Bush record that John McCain wants to perpetuate, that this was going to be a major danger. I really felt that every minute we're spending discussing Sarah Palin is a win for John McCain, even if that time is spent exposing the serial lies. It doesn't matter. It's much more important to focus on the one big truth of the great disaster that the Bush administration has brought.
So let's talk about sort of financial deregulation. You know, as you know, the house, that's sort of the house that's currently on fire. You know, maybe a whole block is about to go on fire, but this is the house that's currently burning. What do you think about, you know, what brought us here? Do you have any?
You know, what brought us here is the illusion that somehow you could have free markets, unregulated, bring about public good.
Yeah.
That is really the simple philosophy behind the domestic Bush doctrine, as opposed to the foreign policy Bush doctrine that Sarah Palin is not familiar with. And that, even though we had so much evidence that this was not working, whether it was when it came to consumer protection or Wall Street, here we are again. And for me, the saddest part of this is that we are basically now, with this latest decision to bail out AIG to the tune of $85 billion, what we're basically telling the American people is that if you're big enough, you're not going to be allowed to fail. But if you're an ordinary American whose home has been foreclosed, and 4 million of Americans are either seeing their houses foreclosed or will soon, then you're on your own, buddy. That's not really what America was meant to be about, and that's, for me, one of the major decisions that we have to make as a country, and John McCain and Barack Obama are at very different parts of the spectrum here.
All right. All right.
He's trying to make Twitter work.
Yeah, I was going to take questions on Twitter, but I'm not seeing it come up here. There's still a problem with the network. I think we have some microphones somewhere floating around, or will in a moment, and we'll bring them up. So if, we're probably going to have you raise your hand, and somebody will bring a microphone to you rather than setting up lines. Kind of coming back around to HuffPost as a media phenomenon. New York, New York traditionally the home of media. Yet most of the new media stuff that's happening today is out in California. We look at sites like Dig. We look at the new media giant of them all, Google, Yahoo. Yet you're here in New York. What has that brought to you? That makes you special.
Well, we love being in New York. It's been great for us to be sort of part of the energy of the city, even though we are operating on the internet. It's been a great place to recruit young, driven editors, and we have many of them, and to actually bring great people working in our technology department. And many of you from here, from all over the country, and I spend a lot of my time on the West Coast in Los Angeles. But the key is really to create that community of people who want to constantly invent and reinvent. That we cannot stop at any moment. So we are constantly creating new technological tools to improve what we're doing, bringing in more video. All that is sort of part of keeping the community engaged.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any questions here in the audience? Okay.
I was just curious, why do you think conservative ventures like Pajamas Media and those other groups have sort of failed, in the blogosphere, whereas HuffPo and Daily Kos have sort of persevered and made it through? And go Obama.
There's no question that for whatever reasons in the conservative or the progressive DNA, we are seeing that conservatives are much better on talk radio, and progressives have been much better on the internet. Part of it may be that they're blowhards. And
so can you tell us what you really think, Arianna?
It's easy to be a blowhard on radio because most people don't talk back to you. On the internet, if you're a blowhard, if you write something that is incorrect, it's going to be corrected so quickly. I mean, the self-correcting nature of the medium always stuns me and amazes me. If I have one date wrong, or one name wrong, or anything in my blogs, I know that it will be less than a minute before a commenter points it out. And then I can transparently correct it. So that, I love that. I love the fact that you show your work, that you transparently get corrected. That whole medium is just, for me, what promotes truth-seeking. And no, when we actually at the Huffington Post have a big guideline when you go backstage to blog, which is no conspiracy theories. It's about the facts. So if you believe that 9/11 was created by the government, go somewhere else to post that. So that's really part of the kind of editorial policy.
There's also something really interesting. You have a record, in an evanescent medium like talk radio. You could say one thing today, another thing tomorrow. Although actually with YouTube, we're seeing a lot of those reversals exposed. But there really is a tradition that you don't go back and sort of silently edit a post that you did yesterday.
Right.
And I think that contributes to the visibility of the dialogue. I think is a really important part of it. Another question over.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, Arianna. I read the Huffington Post daily, several times a day, in fact. One of the questions I have for you is that I've noticed that as America, we're engaging a lot with the Muslim and Islamic world, whether it's by invading countries or in other aspects of our entanglement with the Middle East. But on the other hand, our media organizations, whether it's the mainstream media or even the Huffington Post, lacks Muslim American journalists or voices. And I don't mean people like Irshad Manji who aren't in the mainstream of her community, but people who are, American Muslims in the mainstream, but who have a voice and an opinion to give. So I'm wondering, why do you think it is, but both at the Huffington Post and in other news organizations, editors haven't tapped Muslim American writers to inject their views and opinions into the civic conversation?
Well, first of all, we would love to do a better job of that. So if you or anyone else would like to write for the Huffington Post, we'd love it. And I have a very simple email address, arianna@huffingtonpost.com, and you can send us anything you want. I mean, that's really how we recruit. We reach out to people who want to write on any subject, and we make it very easy, and not just on politics. I mean, part of really what has helped our growth is that we've launched multiple other verticals on different topics. So half our traffic now does not come from politics. So if it doesn't have to be just Muslim political issues. It could be anything that brings the cultures together more closely, and that's part of the way we see the interaction with multiple groups and multiple interests.
Hey, another question?
Hi, Arianna. I have a bit of a unique perspective because other than computer science, I actually have a political science degree. And one of my questions I wanted to ask you is something that's been bugging me for a while. Do you think the internet will bring greater transparency to government and politics, or do you think it can be used as a tool of fascism, sort of like viral politics to quickly spread lies and create false pictures and false news? Which direction do you think it could go? Because I know in China they're going the second direction with it.
Well, first of all, as you know, radio was a great tool of fascism. I believe that the internet is entirely good for democracy, in that, sure, you can spread lies and they can go viral, but you can very quickly correct them. And I feel that lies have less of a chance of succeeding because of the internet. Also, we see the way, for example, the Obama campaign used the internet in an absolutely brilliant way. I can say without a doubt that were it not for the internet, Barack Obama would not be the nominee. He used it to raise millions of dollars, to organize, to create social networking sites where supporters communicated with each other. So all that can help relatively unknown candidates from challenging status quo candidates.
I think it's really important if you look at the mybarackobama.com, when he supported the FISA legislation, people took him to task for it there.
Right.
It really was an open platform for his community to interact with him, as opposed to just the party organ.
Exactly.
And that became news that his supporters were not happy with the position he'd chosen.
And if he wins, his supporters will be there to help the governing process.
Right.
Because it's increasingly become clear that political leaders need the community to be constantly pushing them to do the right thing. And that's why, for example, we believe that one of the problems in our political system is the dominance of polling and the way we all pay so much attention to polls. And then, a week later, they are reversed, and we suddenly make a big deal of the fact that they are reversed. And we ignore the fact that a lot of them are wrong all the time. We have response rates are down to 25, 30%. So most people refuse to talk to pollsters.
Well, there's also a really interesting point that the polls typically call landlines. A whole segment of the population doesn't even have a landline anymore. So
that's why, at the Huffington Post, we've created a new feature that we are calling Pollstrology. And we offer you all the polls you want, together with the astrological charts of the candidates. So that way you can take it all with a pinch of salt. And I must say one more thing, which is that has been just a great new feature we introduced, was Off the Bus, which is a group now of over 10,000 citizen journalists around the country who are off the bus, meaning they're not on the bus, they're not on the plane, just taking down what the candidates say. And they've broken some wonderful stories in this campaign. And they're, again, creating another platform for citizen journalists to participate.
Yeah. Another question?
Hi, Arianna. Over the last several years, we've seen the Huffington Post go from the celebrity blog role to having local news aggregation to now having local coverage in Chicago. And the ecosystem for community is constantly developing from the commenters to the off-the-bus community to now Chicago. And I was just wondering if you could speak to any of the trends that you're noticing as you bring so many diverse groups together across the website.
Yes, actually, there is something that I'm noticing, which actually I believe is going to be the next big thing on the internet. Are you all ready? I think the next big thing is going to be connecting in order to disconnect, in order to get connected with ourselves. I feel that there is a huge need and longing, and you and I talked about it backstage, to unplug and recharge. And so our living vertical is really growing in leaps and bounds, and our subhead is unplug and recharge, because we believe that even if all you care about is success and power and sex and money, you'll be better at all that if you take some time to unplug and recharge. So, for example, our living vertical is incredibly pro-sleep. We really believe in sleep. We believe that sleep deprivation is a thing that has driven our culture crazy and has made people not be able to relax, unwind, enjoy life. So we have an oasis, we're calling it, where you can do 2 things in 2 minutes or 5 things in 5 minutes, just kind of something to unplug and recharge and do your life with more joy and more fulfillment. So that's another thing, together with our politics, which is really driving a lot of our coverage. In fact, we even brought it to the convention, and We had a place where you could go from morning till night and have yoga and facials and massages and organic food, all free. And you could see all those stressed out delegates and media people coming in and leaving recharged and happier.
So what do you do personally to recharge?
I know what you do. I found out. Do you know what he does personally to unplug and recharge, which I love? He splits wood. Don't you love that? I personally meditate, I do yoga, I hike, and I get enough sleep most of the time. And I find that if you have any ideas or any particular things that you do to unplug and recharge, let us know. We'd love to post them on the site. Send them to me, because I'm sure most people could not imagine that you split wood.
Yeah, it is very, it's very relaxing, actually. All right, with that, we're going to have to wrap. You guys are all going to have to take that advice, and at the end of this conference, we're heading into the weekend and unplug and relax.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Arianna.
Thank you. Thank you.